Brought to you by Penguin.
Courage of the Shipyard Girls. Written by Nancy Revell. Read by Janine Birkett. The moral right of the author has been asserted. There is no living thing that is not afraid when it faces danger. The true courage is in facing danger when you are afraid. And that kind of courage you have in plenty. L. Frank Baum, The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. Prologue. On the last day of June 1942, a young woman in Sunderland stepped out of her front door on her way to work at one of the town's biggest shipyards, J. L. Thompson and Sons. It was 6:45 in the morning, but the sun was already up, and proving that this day, like the one before, was going to be hot and sweaty. The young woman, who was wearing a colourful headscarf and denim overalls, with a boxed gas mask and haversack slung over her shoulder, was leaving at the same time the postwoman was making her early morning deliveries. If an outsider was watching, they would rightly presume the two women knew each other by the ease of their greeting. The postwoman handed the young woman an envelope, lingering for a short moment, which was unusual for her, as she was not one to idle. She touched the young girl's arm gently before going on her way. Tearing open the envelope, the young woman stood stock still as she read the few paragraphs that had been typed onto the single sheet of paper. Passers-by would have observed that she stood and read it for longer than was needed. For a moment, it looked as though she was going to turn and go back into the house from which she had just come, but she didn't. Instead, she reached into the top pocket of her overalls and pulled out what appeared to be a ring, and put it on her left hand. As she did so, the letter she had just received in the post floated freely to the ground, and a short blast of air swept it under an oncoming tram. The young woman didn't make any attempt to chase after the piece of paper that had escaped her grasp, but instead stepped onto the pavement and joined the throng of chattering, flat-capped workers, all heading towards the shipyards that lined the banks of the weir. If anyone had looked at the face of the woman with the ruby engagement ring on her finger, they would have seen tears rolling down her cheeks unchecked. But nobody noticed, so nobody asked if she was all right, and she walked in her hobnailed boots to the ferry that would take her to her place of work. A place of work where people would spot that she had been crying, and would ask her why and comfort her, just as the young man who had given her the ruby engagement ring knew they would. Chapter 1. The letter floated to the ground before a gentle breeze lifted it up again, at the exact time a tram was trundling down the length of Tatum Street. Like the first draw of a fire as it catches, the letter was sucked under the metal belly of the carriage and disappeared from view. By the time the tram had screeched its way past number 34, the letter had been unceremoniously spat out again into the still morning air, and after another brief flutter, it landed by the side of the road. The letter's near demise did not go unnoticed, though. For 2 minutes earlier, at the exact time Polly had been leaving for work and had bumped into the postwoman, Maud Good had been having her usual early morning tussle with the heavy blackout curtains that adorned her bedroom window. "Mavis!" Maud kept her sight focused on the letter now languishing in the gutter across the road from where she and her sister lived above the sweet shop they jointly owned. "Mavis!" Her tone was different to the one she normally adopted to wake her sister. This morning her voice was serious, urgent, lacking its usual annoyance that she was, as always, the first to rise. "What's the matter?"
Sample complete. Ready to continue?